Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? Your first one in as always. Good to see you, brother. How you doing? How's things? Should pin the live show quick. Scott, good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? How's things? Good day, Miles. Mike, good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? Welcome back. Thank you so much, Scott. Welcome back, brother Miles. Funky brother, good to see you as well. Thank you so much. It's good to be back. It's been a while since we did the live show. Let me just pin the live show before we start. Pin to your profile. Pin. Okay. Good evening, CMF. Let's go funky. Evening, Miles. Glad to see you back. Good to see you as well, Jason. How you doing, brother? Good evening, Professor Miles. Good to see you as well, funky. How you doing? Okay, let's do intro, disclaimer, and what we're going to be talking about tonight's live. So by that time, everyone should be tuned in for the first part of the live show. Welcome to the CMF live show. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Mouse Family. My name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards for the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much all the information you should know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital sector. The disclaimer of this live show, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. And also on tonight's live show, we're going to be covering quite a bit. Things that essentially also happened while I was away. If you didn't know, I was in the US for a 2-week vacation. It's my first time to the US as well. I was quite excited. I saw a lot of things. And it was exactly what I thought the US was going to be. And I enjoyed it quite a lot. So in the best place, I would have to say, from what I've been to, was definitely Malibu. It definitely takes the rankings, especially in terms of scenery as well. And Vegas was quite interesting as well. And yeah, let's just leave it as interesting. Now, on tonight's live show, we're going to be talking about what's been happening around the world and essentially the impact that we've seen inside the crypto space. A lot of impact inside the crypto space. Crypto, gold, silver, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, everything pretty much took a huge dump on the market space. Things seem to be, restoring extremely slowly, you could pretty much say, but there's still a lot of things happening around the world in terms of geopolitics that is impacting the crypto market space. And let's not forget the most recent one, which is the files that essentially were released by the Epstein situation that indicated certain scenarios around Bitcoin, Ripple, and Stellar, which we'll essentially be covering on tonight's live show as well. Now, before we go through any news, essentially, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into the first news, which is just pretty much a drop down of what's been happening so far and essentially what's to come moving forward. Now, let's see where we're at inside the comments. By the way, also, thank you so much to everybody who has straight away liked and retweeted this live. If you're watching this on X, thank you so much to everyone who's watching on YouTube right now, who's also straight away liked the live show as well. And a special thank you to everybody who has put a comment outside the live. Now, let's go to the comment section first before we do go through the first news. Let's see where we're at. And I'm betting there's probably a lot of questions to be answered as well. And I'm here for it. And as I say, this is also a Q&A live show as well, which means if you do have any questions, don't get shy. Put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's go through the comment section first. This was happening there. Hi, Miles and everyone. Looking fresh, Miles. Welcome back. Good to see you on One Love. How you doing? Hello, family. Let's go, Scott. How you doing? Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Hello, Miles. Good to see you back, brother. T, good to see you as well. How you doing? Evening, Miles and CMF family. Good to see you back, boss. Let's go, Carlos. How you doing? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Welcome. Great back to see you. Let's go, freedom forever. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You, T-Dog. Will XRP increase in price in the next 12 months? A few things need to happen in the next 12 months, so which we expect them to happen. One of them essentially being a Clarity Act. Now, the debate around essentially XRP and Ripple for, certain influencers or certain people have always been that essentially, Ripple has clarity, XRP has clarity. So the Clarity Act doesn't really matter when it comes to XRP because XRP has clarity, which is true up to a certain extent. XRP for sure has clarity. We saw that through that long battle with the SEC, which There's some references there with the SEC picking and choosing XRP with the Epstein files, which we'll get into a bit later on. But the idea that XRP has clarity 100%, it definitely has clarity after the long battle it went through. So why isn't it moving? And why isn't the Clarity Act, not important for XRP? In reality, it is. The Clarity Act essentially the Clarity Act gives banks essentially and institutions clarity to move forward. Yes, XRP has clarity 100%, but the banks don't. And neither do the institutions. So they still need clarity to be able to utilize the crypto sector moving forward, i.e., XRP. So, a few things that to be happening for essentially the price of XRP, only price of essentially other tokens to be moving towards the utility era. One, a Clarity Act needs to finally pass through. Now, we've had essentially discussions regarding the Clarity Act in the past following weeks regarding essentially voting that's been happened, certain things have been passed, and so on. But we still haven't reached a level where Trump has signed it into law. Let's just say the simplest way to put it. So we need that essentially officially passing through. After that, we can slowly start moving into utility, which was the entire purpose of cryptocurrencies. So spanning from now until the end of the year, let's just say the next 12 months or so on, 11 months, a few things need to happen. And will those few things happen? By the looks of it, yes, you could say. The only ones that are against it has been the Democratic Party, which when I wasn't going live because I was in the US on a vacation, I saw the voting that happened. And the only people that pretty much rejected the idea of, stable coins having yields or essentially a Clarity Act being able to pass through, the only people that voted against it were all Democrats. Every single one of them was a Democrat. And their main concern was that Trump's family is enriching themselves through the crypto space, and therefore they don't want that to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then they'll let the crypto space thrive, which I think is a load of complete BS. Because in the past, when Biden was the president of the United States, Trump's family wasn't enriching themselves inside the crypto space, yet the crypto space was prominently attacked by the Democratic Party back to back. So the idea that Democratic Party are not voting for the crypto space because Trump's family is enriching themselves is a load of BS, because Trump's family wasn't enriching themselves when Biden was in power, yet the crypto space was still criticized by the Democratic Party. So I don't know where their essentially morals lie, but it's complete lies, the easiest way to put it. Now, but a lot of things need to happen. Those things happen. Why not? The sky is the absolute limit. Any news on? But great question, Honorable Scott. Hi, Miles. Hope you had a fantastic time away, and it's great to have you back, mate. Let's go. Good to see you as well, Adi. How you doing? I have been dollar cost averaging over the latest months with XRP. Let's go, Scott. Smart move. I think 100%. Obviously, not financial advice in any sort of way, but smart move. Any news on HBAR, XLM, or XDC? No major news, I would have to say, except the Epstein file situation where Stellar was mentioned and so was Ripple, which again, we won't go through down tonight's live. Good evening, Miles. Good to see you as well. Callie, good to see you as well. How you doing? Good evening, Miles and family. Hope you had a great holiday, brother. I definitely did. 100%. Any news on HOT? Is still a good hold in your opinion? HOT is a high risk, high reward type of project. It's cheap for what it is, and it could reach, essentially, my point of view, it could reach essentially the heights it reached before, a little bit even more, you could possibly say, depending on how they move forward. But it's still a high risk, high reward project. Personally, I've said in the past as well, and I see it as a good project in general. Welcome back, brother Miles. Comatose, good to see you. How you doing? Thank you so much. Morning, Miles and CMF. Great to have you back, Miles. A little bit of a tan I see too. Must have been nice to see some sunshine. Hope you had a wonderful time. Shelly, let's go. Good to see you. How you doing? Yes, definitely. I do miss the sun in LA compared to the rain in London. I mean, the first day I was back in London already was raining as I got off the plane. But that's London for you. The weather never changes. Miles, you yourself advised that Trump's family hold off once they were in office until the crypto passage passed before getting involved. You should have advised them on this long. Let's go, Scott. Now, first news. We're going to go through essentially what's been happening since I've been off, just in case you missed a few things or you just want clarity on a few things. So this is essentially what CoinDesk released today. This is absolutely insane. Bitcoin's weekend crash exposes the cracks beneath the latest boom inside the crypto space. The price of the largest essentially digital asset didn't just stumble, it plunged through the $80,000 floor, hitting levels not seen since the essentially tariff tantrums that essentially happened back in April 2025. By Saturday afternoon, in thin weekend liquidity, as essentially at just above $77,000, Bitcoin had seen a staggering $800 billion in market value vanish since October peak, essentially above $126,000, and about $2.5 billion in leveraged long position liquidations in 24 hours. The wipeout has even pushed Bitcoin out of the global top 10 assets, where it essentially had been for a long time, now trailing essentially institutional heavyweights like Elon Musk's Tesla and Saudi essentially oil firms. To say that this sell off has been painful would be putting it mildly, as social media essentially is full blown panic mode, and whether essentially wherever you look, there is blood on the streets. And this is not just isolated to Bitcoin. This week essentially has been painful across all asset types, from tech stocks to precious metals. If you're wondering why digital gold narrative has suddenly gone silent, here is essentially a breakdown of the three-headed monster currently essentially driving the markets into a state of extreme fear. The immediate spark essentially on Saturday was literal explosion. Reports of a potential sharp military escalation between the US and Iran sent a risk appetite into a deep freeze. In a repeat of a familiar script, traders didn't treat Bitcoin as a safe haven, they treated it as a liquidity source, which is true. The debate that essentially Bitcoin is the digital gold is the narrative that's being pushed by Bitcoin maxis, especially Michael Saylor, that Bitcoin is digital gold. But yet, when America essentially threatened Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Bitcoin wasn't treated as digital gold. It's correct. Instead, it plunged. In times of war, investors typically engage in a flight of safety, moving capital into the US dollar. Because Bitcoin is a 24/7 market, it often acts as the first responder to global panic. On Saturday, essentially, it served as the world's ATM, being sold off to cover losses and find safety, and essentially aimed a thin, low liquidity weekend. Not to mention that liquidity since October 10th crash, essentially, which has many pointing fingers at Binance, has never recovered, making essentially market dynamics even more fragile heading into this weekend. Bitcoin wasn't the only victim this week. The broader store of value trade essentially come under siege. Gold, for example, plunged 9% in a single trading session on Friday to just under $4,900, while silver essentially suffered a historical 26% crash to $85.30. In a bizarre twist, the traditional safe havens of gold and silver were also being sold off alongside crypto. Analysts suggest that the massive rally in the US dollars initiated by the nomination of Kevin Walsh to lead the Fed has made these dollar priced essentially metals too expensive for international buyers, leading to a massive de-risking across all hard assets. In early Sunday essentially trade, both gold and silver are bouncing from the essentially difficult Friday, up 1% and 3%. Currently, gold is trading near $4,730 and silver around $81. The geopolitical shock that hit a market already bruised by Washington's shift in political landscape, as the price slipped, it triggered a massive mechanical breakdown inside the markets. According to data from CoinGlass, over $850 million in bullish bets, long positions, were wiped out inside essentially the markets in a matter of hours on Sunday, when prices started to essentially crumble, eventually adding up to nearly $2.5 billion. These liquidations occur when traders borrow money to bet that the price will rise. Once the price hits a certain essentially trapdoor, exchanges automatically sell their holdings to repay the debt. This essentially creates a domino effect. Forced selling leads to lower prices, which triggered even more liquidations across the board. Nearly 200,000 traders had their accounts blown out on essentially on Saturday. To make matters worse, Bitcoin's price plummeted briefly below Michael Saylor's strategy MSTR average entry point of approximately $76,037, putting a massive Bitcoin stack on the water. Panic set in that he might have been essentially forced to sell his stash, essentially making the sell-off even deadlier. However, CoinDesk debunked that theory, explaining that Saylor won't be forced to sell his Bitcoin stash. Given essentially none of his coins are essentially pledged as collateral, what essentially that means is, though it is essentially, it will hinder his ability to raise cheap capital to buy more Bitcoin in the open markets, which is exactly what's happening. Apparently, Michael Saylor, we're going to talk a little bit more on that tonight's live as well, but Michael Saylor is raising more money to buy Bitcoin at these prices. Although Saylor later came out essentially signaling that he would buy the dip, the damage was done. The market essentially realized that if a large corporation such as Strategy can raise more capital to buy Bitcoin in an open market that is already fragile, markets will be left with no buyers, becoming vulnerable to forced liquidations and profit taking. Consistently, this essentially the sentiment has shifted from moonshot optimism to defensive hedging as investors rush to buy price insurances in the options market against further slides towards $75,000. This contagion essentially is already leaking into traditional finance. When the New York Stock Exchange is closed for the weekends, the US stock futures, essentially, which open for trade on Sunday evening US East Coast time, are lower across the board. The Nasdaq is down 1% and the S&P 500 is off by 0.6%. Perhaps the most telling part of this crash isn't the price, it's the wallet data. According to CoinGlass data, small investors are running, in other words, small fish. Holders with less selling Bitcoin over the essentially month, they were calculating spooked by the 35% drop from the $126,000 all-time high. Meanwhile, mega whales, those holding 1,000 plus Bitcoins and above, have been quietly adding to their stacks. This coherent is now back at levels not seen since late 2024, effectively absorbing the coins that panicked retailers traders are dumping. Although their buyers weren't significantly enough to move the price upwards, they were buying people out. So while some people were essentially panic selling when the market was dropping, people were buying them out. It wasn't enough to move the market up, but it was enough essentially for them to stack up even more. Now let's zoom out and compare this weekend's sell-off and current market dynamics with those that played out before. To be clear, this cycle is not all doom and gloom, and it really isn't. The likes of BlackRock and JP Morgan of a traditional finance have been going all in on crypto, though their exchange, essentially their exchange traded funds and stablecoins and regulatory frameworks are being created around the world to make crypto more accessible and usable for the masses. And many legitimate crypto companies are trading publicly and turning it into part of their money market funds. Essentially, must have stock allocations. None of these were even remotely thinkable during previous cycles, which is incredibly true. Yes, we did have massive sell offs, shocking sell offs, that essentially were triggered by certain maneuvers inside the markets. One being the tensions that were rising in the Middle East with the United States threatening the Islamic Republic of Iran. Two, essentially being that, Jerome Powell is being replaced by somebody that Trump wants. Some people don't like that. Some people think Trump is unpredictable. And that's what essentially shakes the market out. And some people just assumed that we have reached a top for essentially precious metals, which made essentially gold dump, silver dump, and other precious metals also dumping inside the market space. The reason why crypto was affected the most, because it's a 24/7 market space. So while the Nasdaq essentially was closed, let's just say, or the S&P 500 and so on, the traditional market space was closed, crypto was 24/7. So crypto was impacted first and the hardest. Even though essentially Bitcoin is suggested as digital gold or a safe haven asset, in a scenario like that, it should have been seen as a safe haven asset. In reality, it wasn't, as usual. As I've said in the past, if two countries go to war right now, is Bitcoin going to go up or down? Because it's digital gold. Technically, it should hold its ground. In reality, it never does. When major geopolitical tensions happen, Bitcoin never holds its ground. It's the first one that's impacted the worst, which essentially lays onto the rest of the crypto space, which also dumps as well. The faster we get regulations, the faster we can decouple from Bitcoin's footsteps, and the faster we could go into utility and move out of this section of buy, sell when it comes to crypto, because crypto is being treated like stocks, because we're just buy, sell, and there's no utility happening. Yes, there is some utility in tokenization happening, but it's not enough in terms of an actual utility, in terms of the financial sector changing on a larger scale, or massive tokenization happening worldwide, or essentially the idea that we move fully to essentially digital currencies. So there's a lot of things that still need to happen. But the reason essentially crypto was affected the most, it's because it's 24/7 market space. So the news is obviously going to affect it anytime. Now, but the parallels between the last 4 months and the beginning of the crypto winter in late 2021, early 2022 are perhaps growing. While the names and methods have changed, human behavior and boom bust nature of markets haven't. The likes of essentially Three Arrows Capital, Do Kwon, and Terra USD, BlockFi, and Sam Beckman-Fried might have been replaced by the Trump's family alleged naked, essentially profiting Michael Saylor's massive buying and the promises of 11% risk-free rate in the world of a 3% risk-free rates. And the world essentially followed crypto Twitter personalities who teamed up with investment bankers to make a quick buck in digital asset treasury companies. Now, there was a lot of fraud that also happened during the market's dumping. Certain crypto exchanges took advantage of the market's dumping and decided to dump with them. And it also essentially decided to short the market. And certain crypto exchanges have also been fined in the past for essentially white trading, whitewashing the markets, in other words. Just as in 2021, these new dynamics have probably created a speculative bubble that has likely collapsed in 2026. The only question now is how long and how deep the downtrend, essentially the downturn, will be. For now, the crypto market seems to be reviving in a very, very small percentage. While no one has essentially found fond memories of 2022 crypto winter, with the price of Bitcoin falling 80%, the timeline was relatively brief, roughly 1 year from the blow off top to the bottom. From there, Bitcoin essentially quickly doubled in price, rose essentially through 2023, and ultimately hit a new record early in 2024. In theory, if we're in essentially another 80% decline from the October 2025 high of $126,000, Bitcoin should be around $25,000. Is it? No. It's a scary number to even think about, but it might be necessary to wipe out the worst of the past bull market's grift and clear the decks for another sustained run higher. The essentially 2022 bear market came not far after the collapse of FTX and the arrest of its CEO, essentially Sam Beckman-Fried. Whether bracelets will be necessary for any of this cycle's bull market personalities remain to be seen. It's only when the tide goes out that you discover who's been swimming naked, said essentially Warren Buffett. The tide may not be fully out yet, but it surely feels like it's headed that way. In other words, we've somehow reached the bottom on a drastic essentially drop inside the market space, and we should be slowly heading to the upside. Now, the reason why essentially we see incredible impact on the crypto market space when it comes to negative news, one, as I said, is 24/7 market space, which gets impacted first. Two, the reason why the crypto market space was impacted even more heavily than any other essentially asset on the market space, traditional, non-traditional, was because crypto was also manipulated on a larger scale by market makers, by essentially the house, which is i.e. the exchanges, and also by whales. As you can tell, essentially from Glassnode data, when people were panic selling during this massive drop, there was buyers. People were buying people out of their positions. It wasn't enough to push the markets up, but they were still buying people out. So the indication is the majority that sold from the retail section, the panic sellers, made a very, very bad mistake because the minority that were buying them out wasn't able to push the market up, but the minority that was buying them out could see the bigger picture. Because we've been through essentially market ups and downs. We've seen drastic drops. The last drastic drop we had when China got tariffed on their semiconductors. And we saw one of the biggest drops ever possible inside the crypto space. It's something that we've seen back to back. So it shouldn't fear you every time we go through this downtrend because you know what's going to happen next. And that's why the majority always ends up selling because they essentially being pressured by essentially they might need to pay certain bills, which is fair enough, or essentially they're being pressured by exchanges, by essentially fear, by market makers, by the house. But the minority that holds their position down or has enough money to buy are always on the winning side in the long term. They weren't able to, as I said, push the market up, but they're on the winning side because they can see through all the BS. There are things, as I said previously, that are happening inside the market space that weren't happening in the past. And it's been mentioned by CoinDesk's report that was released today. Things that are happening now when we have essentially behemoths like BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, BNY Mellon, the list just goes on, all involved inside the crypto space. There were people even coming out and saying, this is it, crypto's done. It's done forever. How could it be done when we have behemoths inside the crypto space? From the banking sector to the institutional sector, from the US to Singapore, to Dubai, to Hong Kong, to Tokyo, to London, to the EU, and the list goes on. So how can we be over inside the crypto space in any sort of a way when you have behemoths from institutional sectors and banking sectors all inside the crypto space? What happened there was it opened up space. And if you were smart enough, you were holding your position down. If you had money, you were buying. If you didn't have money and you were just holding your position, you're still smart. And if you sold because you had bills to pay, that's completely understandable. If you sold because you panicked, you shouldn't be in the space to begin with. Not financial advice whatsoever. But it isn't something that we've just experienced once. It's something we've experienced back to back. So if you keep on seeing something happen back to back, and then you see what happens afterwards, you shouldn't be panic selling. You shouldn't even be worried. As I said, the last incredible market dump we had was China's semiconductor tariffs. After that, the market bounced up. And now we have this. What do you think is going to happen next? Is the market going to go completely zero? No, it's going to bounce back. You've got to understand what's happening. Also, another reason, we don't have regulations at all, that much. The one regulation that passed inside the United States, the biggest market space in the world, was essentially the essentially Stablecoin Act, which was the Genius Act, which then essentially they went back to the books to change it because the banks didn't like the idea that you can earn essentially yield on your stablecoins because the banks can't offer you the same scenario, which they can, but they're too greedy to offer it to people. So then they went back to the drawing boards. The longer we don't have essentially regulations inside the market space, the more the markets can be manipulated by anyone. It could be by the Trump family. It could be essentially by market makers. It could be by exchanges. It could be by whales. It could be by anything the markets could be impacted by. And I'm not saying, as I said previously, regulations come, no more market manipulation. No, there'll be less market manipulation, especially less for essentially crypto projects that have utility and are going to be advancing further on in regulatory essentially environments. So if you are worried even for a second, you shouldn't be. It's not something new. It's something that we went through pretty much like 12 times by now. On that note, the SIBO is what we're going to talk about next. And also the Jeffrey Epstein situation, which we're going to get a little bit later on tonight's live show. That also impacted crypto market space. It impacted Bitcoin's future. You could pretty much say that. Bitcoin is being haggard by essentially people, obviously, who hate Bitcoin maxis. And Bitcoin maxis is obviously defending Bitcoin's future, saying, Jeffrey Epstein isn't essentially the creator of Bitcoin. He was just the person that funded Bitcoin, which isn't still good in any sort of a way, to be fairly honest. And it goes back to what essentially that businessman said. I forgot his name, but everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say this famous line. If you knew who created Bitcoin, it would go to FN zero. Everybody knows who that person is. Maybe he was onto something, essentially, when he said those words regarding essentially Bitcoin's future. But we sure as hell know what actually has a future: XRP and XLM. When someone who is a PDF, I'm not going to be mentioning the full word, when somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, who is a PDF, is coming out against XRP and XLM, just know you're on the right side of history. When somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, who's a PDF, is coming out and essentially defending Bitcoin and honestly going against XRP and XLM, and you're somebody that's holding XRP and XLM, just know that you're on the right side of history. Because that PDF is supporting Bitcoin. Now, before we talk about the next essentially part of the crypto, before we talk about the next news on tonight's live, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we go straight into the next news. Let's see what's happening there. And it does explain, why Ripple was haggard along the way. Now, let's see where we were at. We were at here. Once again, honestly, thank you so much to everybody who has liked and retweeted this live show on X. If you're watching this on X, if you watch this on YouTube, thank you so much to everyone who's also liked the live show on YouTube. If you haven't, CMF members, take 5 seconds or even 1 millisecond to like and retweet this live if you're watching this on X. And if you're watching on YouTube, just like the live show. Now, let's see where we're at. We were at here, I think. Let's go, CMF. Hit the like button, share the live. Let's go, Scott. Greetings, Miles. Nice to see you. Hello, CMF. Let's go, Lena. Good to see you. How you doing? I love you guys. You accept the only liberals interest in the group. Now that is love. Let's go, Scott. I am all in on XRP. If it goes to $20, I'd be satisfied. Now saying that, I have a personal belief that within 24 months, it will go up more than that. I have a plan. Do you? Yes, of course. Hi, Miles. Manny, good to see you. How you doing? Scott, let's go. Hi, Miles and the CMF family. I am back. It's good to see you, my friends. Let's go for facts news. How was your trip to the US? And I hope you had a good time there. Carl, good to see you as well, brother. Trip was excellent inside, essentially, in the US. Had an incredible time in the US for first time ever. Yeah, definitely want to, somewhere down the line, go back. Hi, Miles and CMF. Keith, good to see you as well. How you doing? Miles, when do you think gold markets will go up? Slowly, the markets will pick up again. Once this news is slowly dying out. Please like. Let's go, Keith. Let's go, Miles. Again, welcome back. Let's go, Scott. Thank you so much. Hi, Miles and family. Alex, good to see you as well. How you doing? This program has become a part of my afternoon/evening. Thanks for all you do. Thank you so much, Scott, for the kind words. Let's tap the screen and get it to 1,000 CMF. Let's go, Lena. Thank you so much to everybody who's tapping the screen on X. Get to 1,000 likes. Let's go. So true, CMF. Let's go, let's go, Keith. When buying copper, please only get 99.99 graph. Let's go, Keith. How far you think we are from decoupling from Bitcoin, and do you think we really will decouple? Good question. Do I really think we will decouple from Bitcoin? Yes. When can we decouple from Bitcoin? When there's regulations in place, so there's clarity for institutions and essentially financial sector, in other words, to not be operating essentially in gray areas. Gray areas lead to lawsuits, which is the last thing any institution wants. Are we that far off? I wouldn't say we're that far off at all. It's only the Democratic Party that keeps on voting no against it because they don't like the idea of the Trump family enriching themselves inside the crypto space. But again, I call BS on that because Trump's family wasn't enriching themselves on the Biden's essentially administration inside the crypto space, yet the crypto space was scrutinized by the Biden administration. So the idea that they're now saying we're only against crypto because of Trump's family is a load of BS. The Democratic Party is a two-faced liar. And I'm not saying Republican Party or angels or saints in any sort of way either. They're both two-faced liars. But we're not that far off, I'll be very honest. But, crypto companies, crypto CEOs are definitely pushing even more for the crypto space than ever before. So we're not that far off. I read that there are many whales investing in XRP. What's your opinion about the crypto markets for 2026? Do you think interest rates will increase with the new Fed chairman? I think a lot of people who are a part of the Democratic Party are going to hate the idea that Jerome Powell has been essentially changed to a person that is in favor of Trump's administration. Now, the person that's been chosen to lead the Fed is pro-crypto. It's pro-Trump administration, pro-crypto, and so on. And I think a lot of people are going to be against that. One of them being essentially Senator Elizabeth Warren, who already most likely has decided to write many scathing emails to the SEC, to the FBI, to the CIA, if I had to take a guess, going against Trump's pick regarding the chairman of the Fed. Is she going to get any sort of results? Probably not. But they might manipulate certain data that makes essentially Trump's pick look bad. So it is going to be a battle. The Democratic Party never seems to back down and always ends up being on the wrong side of history. And again, I'm not saying Republican essentially party is always on the right side of history. They're politicians. They're technically never on the right side of history. But they're doing a bit of a better job, let's just say. Now, 2026 is going to be an incredible year with a few things happening inside of it. One, obviously, Clarity Act. Two, the Genius Act will advance in the certain things they're trying to change around. More institutions will be involved, more regulations will be happening, more financial sectors involved. This is the year of the institutional sector coming inside the crypto space. We talked about this at the end of the year. At the end of 2025, Grayscale, essentially, Carry Capital, and a few other, Galaxy Digital, Mike Novoscott, they all came out with the exact same speech that we're heading into the institutional sector inside 2026. We're moving away from retail customers and going into, high net worth client bases in 2026. Which, interesting enough, at the beginning of 2026, we had a massive market dump, which opened up space for high net worth individuals to enter the crypto space. How ironic. It's almost like it was coordinated. Now, so 2026 is going to still be an incredible year. It might have started off a little bit bad, but it's going to be ending very well. Now, in my point of view, depending on those things lining up, I read that essentially, and regarding the interest rate scenario with the new Fed chairman, I think he's going to do America quite well. He's going to do rate cuts when it's needed, not when politically he thinks is correct. Even though some might say, well, he's politically in favor of Trump. Yes, he is, no doubt about it. But Jerome Powell is politically in favor of the Democratic Party, and they've done nothing for the United States so far. So let's see how this one plays out. Give the guy a chance, is what I would say. So I think they might try to manipulate his data, the Democratic Party, as they've done in the past. I can't wait for decoupling from BTC. Same, I'm on the same page. I think the entire crypto space is on the same page. We cannot wait for the day that it happens when decoupling starts and we start going into utility. It's no longer buy, sell, buy, sell. Let's see what happens. We treat the crypto market space like stocks, for example, right now, which is not how we should be treating it as. They have utility purposes, but we can't see that until there's regulations and no more gray areas. And certain people don't obviously want regulations inside the market space because they can manipulate it. And those people are ARSE holes. Now, welcome back. Let's go, John. How you doing? February 17th, the real new year, essentially, of those horses. This year will be a golden pops house proton. Think about it, metal proton. Interesting, Keith. Do you think that this crash is a clear out to start the financial reset in crypto? Yes, up to a certain extent, yes. As I said, end of 2025, every crypto CEO, every financial CEO came forward and said 2026 is about moving away from retail money to high net worth money, individuals. And ironically, at the beginning of 2026, we had a massive market dump. It definitely opened up space. When do you see the gold and silver market showing an upward trend? Very soon, I would have to say. 8th of August. The only thing, let's go, Mike. The only thing I see in the crypto space is that those cryptos not worth anything will go away. Just my opinion. I agree with your opinion 100%. As I said in the past as well, once we go further into regulations, crypto projects that actually have utility purposes, that haven't lied over the years, that have contracts in place, will essentially be the ones thriving under regulations. And the crypto projects that lied about, how much reach they really have or how fast they really are or so on, and they thought, they were better than the others, well, we'll see who the clear winners are in that race. Welcome back. Good to see you, Susie. How you doing as well? Good question. Let's go, Scott. Dan Peanut. Do you think Trump will attack Iran? Good question. I hope he does, is what my answer is going to be. I want Trump and Israel to attack the Islamic Republic of Iran. I want them to attack the Islamic Republic of Iran so bad because the longer that they don't do that, the more the Islamic Republic of Iran has control of a lot of violent, essentially, groups around the world. The reason why we see sudden terror attacks happening around the world is because of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And if you're wondering to yourself, who's this guy to be telling people about Iran? I'm Iranian myself. I'm Persian myself. So that should answer your questions. If anybody is out there watching for the first time ever and going, who's this guy to talk about Iran? I want them to attack badly. And Iran plays a very vital role in essentially the world changing over to this new digital foundation. There was an economic report and from the Rothschilds family, and also essentially an economic article that came out somewhere back in 1998 or 1988 or something like that, which talked about essentially this one world future we're going to be living in. And that one world digital future can't happen unless certain banks are on the table. And the banks that aren't on the table is technically Iran's central bank and North Korea's central bank. Now, North Korea is quite easy to get. Iran is quite a difficult one to get. So that needs to happen. You know, if we want to move into this digital world, we need that. Also, Russia and China, so there's many reasons this is happening. Russia and China have gotten extremely strong over the past, you could say, during Biden's essentially administration. Russia and China have got very strong. Now, to take Russia and China's strength away from them, and some might say, why would you want to do that? You got to see the bigger picture. You see, the EU essentially is buying gas from Russia, and they're funding Ukraine at the same time to go up against Russia, which means the EU is stupid enough to fund Russia's war and Ukraine's war, which makes it an endless war. In other words, a war that will continue on forever, pretty much. Because on one side, the EU is sending billions of Russian frozen assets, money, or tax-paying money to Ukraine to fight Russia. At the same time, the EU is spending billions of euros to buy gas from Russia. So it'd be an endless war continuing forever, which is why Trump said, why is the EU funding Ukraine on one side and buying gas from Russia? It makes zero sense. Now, how do you take away power from Russia and China on essentially trying to take over the world? Well, you get the EU to stop buying gas from Russia. How do you do that? Iran. The faster the US takes control, essentially, the faster the US removes the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is very beneficial for the Iranian people themselves, because they're being haggard by this essentially, occupation for over 47 years now. Iran could supply the EU with gas, which means the EU is no longer reliant on Russian gas, which means Russia will get weak because they're not getting the funding they were supposed to be getting, which makes Ukraine stronger, which makes the EU rely on Iran, which makes the EU put pressure more on Russia to end this war. On China's scenario, China essentially has been, climbing the ranks, second biggest economy in the world. The reason why China is sitting essentially at the second biggest economy in the world is because they're getting cheap and free oil and gas from Iran for 47 years, pretty much. Iran sends oil because they're sanctioned. They sell and send cheap oil and gas essentially to China, which in return, China gives them back parts, cheap parts that will break within a year. But they don't care. And Iran doesn't care either because they're making a quick buck because they're sanctioned. The reason why China climbed so fast as the second biggest economy within that 47-year span is because of that. The moment Iran stops selling or giving away free oil and gas to China at an immense level, China will start to tumble back down from second to third to fourth and so on. Not saying it will go to essentially 10th place, but it will tumble down because it doesn't have the resources anymore to be able to move on that scale. And yes, China is huge on the energy resources idea that they're trying to sell to the world of net zero, for example. But that's just a big load of scam. So Iran is key to pretty much everything. If America doesn't want BRICS to take over, they have to get control of Iran. America and Israel and the West in general need Iran to survive. They need the Islamic Republic of Iran to move. They needed to get rid of it. And they need to bring back the Shah. If America wants BRICS to completely fall apart, America needs Iran as an ally, which means they need to remove the Islamic Republic, which will put pressure on Russia because they're no longer supplying the EU with gas, which will put pressure on China, which means they're no longer getting free gas or essentially oil. And the Middle Eastern countries around Iran who are in favor of the Islamic Republic are getting free oil and gas as well. Any country that comes out in favor of Iran and says Iran has the right to defend itself, those are countries that are getting free oil and free gas. And they know when America comes and takes over Iran essentially and gives it back to the people and gives it back to the Shah, those oil and free gas checks they were receiving or money they were receiving will end pretty much. There's a hole, a gas hole, pretty much the easiest way to put it, between Qatar and Iran. There's a gas essentially hole between Iran and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and so on. They're pumping 90% of that gas out, while Iran is only pumping 10% out, 20% out in some cases, and giving it away completely for free. In return, they're getting some money and some parts from the countries they're giving it for free for. That's why those countries are like, no, Iran has the right to defend itself. They're not saying it because they care about the Iranian people. They're saying it because they care about the free gas and oil or the free money they were getting in the meanwhile because they were selling it to Western countries. There's a lot on the table that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to Iran. Iran is key, genuinely key to a lot of things. Iran, it's basically the end of BRICS. America essentially getting control of essentially Iran is the end of BRICS pretty much. Russia doesn't have the funding it needs. China doesn't have the funding it needs going forward either. If China gets sanctioned, if it thinks about jumping inside the Iran war, then it would get sanctioned, which will put more pressure on it. But there is still the idea that, why hasn't America attacked so far? It's because Iran has a massive army, Islamic Republic Army, IRGC in other words, that has more than 1 million people. And those 1 million people are lunatics, genuine lunatics. Every single person that works for the Iranian Islamic Republic of Iran's army is an absolute lunatic. They would easily, strap a backpack to themselves, the easiest way to put it. That's 1 million people that will do that for that regime. So that's why it's a difficult play for the US to go and, take over as easy as they might think it is. It won't be easy, but it is something that needs to be done. Easiest way to put it. It's something that needs to be done. And any country that, as I said, is coming out and saying, staying silent or coming out and saying Iran has the right to defend itself is a country that's being paid off by the Islamic Republic. The EU did a vote which put the Islamic Republic's army on a terror act. Now, there were few countries that didn't come out. At the end, they said, yes, sure, we'll put them on the list. The UK is staying very, very silent on this matter. Reason why? Because the UK is being paid off by the Islamic Republic of Iran. You might think that's an absolute joke, but it is in all reality. The BBC, as we all know, is known as BBC Ayatollah. They've been essentially funding this operation for a very long time as well by feeding propaganda against essentially the Shah of Iran and in favor of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And also, it has been come to light that the Islamic Republic of Iran essentially owns roads in London, actual roads in London of houses worth hundreds of millions of British pounds. Why is a country that's been sanctioned for 47 years have roads of properties worth hundreds of millions of pounds in their portfolio? Why is a country that's been sanctioned for 47 years have those properties in the United Kingdom? Why has the United Kingdom even allowed that to happen by a country that's sanctioned for 47 years? Because they're being paid off. And that's why the United Kingdom is silent on the matter of the Islamic Republic of Iran, because they're being paid off and they're still being paid off. You've got to understand, Iran is like an octopus. The Islamic Republic of Iran is like an octopus. They have their hands into everything. It's a massive play. And if they play it right, if the US plays their cards right, if Israel plays their cards right, the world could be freed from the Islamic Republic of Iran. They could be freed from these random protesting that you might be seeing around the world in favor of the Islamic Republic of Iran. All the terror group acts that you see around the world, or also just actually funded by. There's so many things that could be solved by removing the Islamic Republic of Iran. And also in favor of the US, because BRICS will decouple even further, where Russia doesn't have the funding it needs, China doesn't have the funding it needs on this such a crippling real estate sector. There's so many things. It all leads back to Iran and precious metals. So, there's reasons why America still hasn't attacked and removed the Islamic Republic of Iran, because, as I said, the 1 million people they have that would easily strap on a backpack in favor of the Islamic Republic of Iran, they're all lunatics. Every single one of those people are lunatics in the Islamic Republic of Iran's, forces. Every single one of those lunatics. Um, there's so many things. And the longer this carries on, the more effect it's going to be having on the market space. Every time we get a threat, the crypto market space starts to shake inside the crypto space, because it's 24/7 market space. America throws another threat towards the Iranian government, the crypto space starts to shake. The Nasdaq starts to shake. Precious metals market spaces start to shake. So we need this to be ended. We need this to move faster, because they keep on stretching it out. And the longer they stretch it out, the longer the markets keep on getting affected. It's a key to everything. The Islamic Republic of Iran being removed is a key to everything. It will end the war in Ukraine. It will end so many other wars in the Middle East. So many things positive will happen. But it's difficult for them to just go in because of what the repercussions could possibly be. Because those 1 million people, some of them will do it, some of them will do it for a paycheck, strap a backpack to themselves. Some of them are just brainwashed. They will do it for free. And that's it's a bit of an issue, because they've been brainwashed from a young age. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just so much happening. So I hope and I want that attack to happen. And for the people that are saying, oh, America and Israel will take Iran's oil, take it. By all means, if you want free oil, America and Israel, take some from Iran. Take as much as you want from Iran. Honestly, as if the people that are coming out on social media saying Israel and US only want Iran's oil, it's not like the Iranian people are benefiting from the oil that's being sold off under the table. Not a single penny, not a single penny has went into the pockets of the Iranian people from the oil and gas the Iranian government has been selling off under the table for 47 years. So there's no difference for the Iranian people if Israel and US take some oil and gas, because for 47 years they've been selling it off under the table. So take some as much as you want. Just free the Iranian people and save the world alongside it. Hi, Miles. Welcome back, Stormy. Good to see you. How you doing? That's why, honestly, the Iran situation plays a very big role. I wonder how many of the Democrats are benefiting from crypto. I am tired of their personal rifts hurting the little guys like me. I agree with you, Scott, 100%. Miles, tell me what Elizabeth Warren has accomplished in Congress. I seriously do not know. I like politics and I still do not know. I agree with you and I still don't know what she has accomplished in any sort of a way, but yet people still vote for her. Come on, let's go, XRP Excellent. Let's go, Ian. How you doing, brother? I'm afraid that the people of Iran who has already suffered will suffer more if they attack military. 100% they will. But it's something that needs to happen and a change must come. Evening, Miles of CMF. I hope you had a great holiday. Let's go, Tom. How you doing? I did. Hi, Miles. Been a while. What do you see us talking about in 12 months' time? We'll eventually see three figures in XRP with all those regulations in place. Why not? I've seen a few different videos, probably from paid individuals, stating that most institutions are opting to use Ethereum rather than XRP Ledger. What's your thoughts on that? Absolute loaded BS, I would have to say on that matter. There's more NDAs in place, more contracts in place. Ripple is acquiring billion-dollar businesses to push themselves further. So the idea that they want to use Ethereum, by all means they can if they wanted to, but we all know who's the bigger player here. Hi, Miles. Crypto Q's, good to see you. How you doing? How will China's power its AI machines if supply is cut off from Iran? Will they double deal? Good question. Regarding essentially China being cut off in terms of their power, from Iran, how will they deal with it? Well, how they deal with it is going to be very crippling for their essentially their economics. I would have to say, 100%. China is definitely going to be pressured heavily. Honestly, a lot of people need to understand how much of a big play this Iran situation really, really is. Now, moving on to the SIBO. In other words, the Chicago essentially global markets. The Chicago global markets have confirmed that it is developing a new options based product offering all or none payouts, a structure that could put exchanges in direct competition with prediction markets like Polymarket, Kowski, Robinhood, and Coinbase. So over the past essentially weeks, we have been hearing, more financial institutions entering the fields of essentially prediction markets. Prediction markets are becoming a massive deal inside the crypto space. As I said previously, if you're somebody that's a trader inside the market space who loves futures market space or spot trading, or somebody that just wants to know what's happening, what's everybody's perspective, because it's not just about reading charts when it comes to trading. It's also the psychological factor of what is the majority about to do inside the market space. And you can find that out with prediction market spaces because people are not just, voting, yes, this is going to happen, or no, that's not going to happen. They're putting their money down where their essentially, mouth is and saying, yes, I believe this is going to happen. I bet 10,000, 1 million, whatever. And that gives us an idea of essentially what's possible to come inside the market space because people are putting down their money, not just words. So prediction markets, they're being talked about in Chicago Market Exchange, which is brilliant, which means they're taking much more seriously moving forward. The primary venue for options trading and famous for creating essentially CBOE Volatility Index (VIX) is in early talks with brokerages and market makers about how the product would essentially work, according to essentially an earlier Wall Street Journal report. While details are still being finalized for the Chicago essentially Market Exchange, the goal is to use traditional options wrapper to deliver fixed return outcomes on yes or no style event contracts. A person familiar with the situation told CoinDesk, which is quite ironic because Democratic politicians, especially Senator Elizabeth Warren, said she hates the idea of prediction markets and betting on politicians' futures because it essentially degrades politicians. Degrades politicians is, a bit of a stretch, I would have to say. Politicians are scum. Everybody knows that. You genuinely have to be scum to be a politician. There are a few good eggs there, but the majority are bad eggs. So nothing will genuinely degrade politicians, on that scale. They already degrade themselves when becoming politicians. These types of derivatives, sometimes referred to as binary options, are fixed return contracts and allows traders to wager on whether a specific event will occur. If the essentially event if the cash amount, if not essentially settles at zero, then the payoff structure mirrors the mechanics of the prediction markets where users essentially bet on everything from central bank moves to election results. The CBOE is no stranger to binary style options. In 2008, the exchange launched the binary style options tied to the S&P 500 and the CBOE essentially volatility index VIX, allowing traders to bet on whether those indexes would essentially close above a certain level, but the products essentially struggled to gain traction and were eventually delisted. But now the Chicago Exchange is back with a CFTC regulated style, essentially prediction market space. It's nice to see certain sectors of the crypto space embedding themselves inside the financial sector. It's good to see. It's positive for the crypto space in general. Now, Hong Kong is what we're going to talk about next on tonight's live. Hong Kong will start granting stablecoin essentially issuer licenses in March. That's positive, very positive. Hong Kong's financial watchdog will grant a first batch of very few stablecoin issuers licensing in March, according to a retainers report. Eddie, the chief executive of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the HKMA, said it expects to issue the first series of stablecoin issuer licensing in March, while addressing a Hong Kong Legislative Council meeting on Monday, which is today. However, he said only a very small number would be approved initially. Stablecoins, a subset of cryptocurrencies or prices essentially anchored to fiat money, essentially like the US dollars, seeing increasing adoption worldwide. As the world's major jurisdictions put regulatory frameworks into place, last year stablecoins moved $35 trillion on blockchain rails. Why is it a positive for the world? Let's say if someone like Hong Kong comes to the table, because we want more essentially stable coins advancing in different jurisdictions around the world. Why is that a positive for the entire crypto space? Because people will put their money into stable coins, which eventually people will take that stable coin, either use it for bills or put it into crypto projects, which would add liquidity towards the crypto space because their money is already digital. So it's one click away from buying XRP or one click away from buying XLM or ETH or Bitcoin or AVAX or Solana. You get the picture. That's why we want stablecoins to be pushed even further because stablecoins provide liquidity along the way towards the crypto space. Now, is that in essentially currently a $300 billion asset class, City projected stablecoins to become $1.9 trillion, essentially 1.9 to $4 trillion market space. Standard Chartered CEO essentially Bill Winters said that Hong Kong's push into tokenized money and stablecoins could lay the foundation for a new era of digital trade settlements. Now, Hong Kong is obviously used by the Chinese market space and also used potentially by other Asian market spaces as well as a gateway to the crypto space. So we should be expecting tremendous amount of money, not overnight, but over time, entering through the Hong Kong market space for the ones that did receive a license. The head of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority highlighted that criteria for stablecoin issuer licensing and approval assessments focus essentially on issues such as risk management, anti-money laundering measures, and backing assets of stablecoins. He also said license issuers must comply with local regulations for cross-border activities, and adding that mutual essentially regulation agreements with other jurisdictions could be explored in the future. So that is essentially what's happening in terms of Hong Kong's market space, which is extremely positive essentially for the rest of the crypto space. Now, here is also a breakdown of what's going to be happening and some times and deadlines you should know about inside the crypto space. Times and deadlines that are coming, essentially in terms of the regulations, the sit downs, the bankers, and so on. So, hints of progress that are happening inside the crypto space. As I said, it's not all doom and gloom, and it is something that we have experienced inside the crypto space before with this market dump. It's probably the 12th, as I said, the 12th maybe such a market dump we've had, or the 11th market dump that we've had, and we all know what happens after a market dump. It's a rise. So, here's a hint of essentially what's happening inside the crypto space in terms of the regulation sector or the institutional sector or the government sector. Despite the rocky start, crypto policymaking got off essentially to this year. At the moment, it does look like US policymakers are making progress on legislative and regulatory fronts. The White House is kicking off new discussions on stablecoin yield with representatives of the banking and crypto industries. The Senate Agriculture Committee voted to advance market structure legislations. The White House essentially is directly involved in resolving yield issues, and the SEC and CFTC are back to trying to essentially get crypto rulemaking going. What we don't know yet is how quickly these discussions will lead to changes in the Senate Banking Committee version of the market structure bill, or indeed how far apart the different groups are. The year is still young, but lawmakers appear to be making progress on market structure legislations. So let's see what happens essentially in February. The White House is convening essentially a meeting of representatives from the crypto and banking industries to kickstart a conversation on stablecoin yields and rewards. The parties involved so far largely consist of representatives from trade organizations and lobbyist groups, though a handful of companies also appear to be sending representatives from their policy teams. The parties will likely essentially discuss what they will be willing to compromise on around the yield issue and could essentially form the basis of further negotiations as the Senate Banking Committee gets back to negotiating the bill itself. Of course, yield rewards was just one of the many outstanding areas of disagreements because the banks don't like the idea of anybody earning some sort of a yield on their stablecoins because they can't offer it to their client base, and they're scared people will start moving their money out of bank accounts, which means banks won't have enough money to essentially trade on your money and essentially have a bank run situation because people will move their money to stable coins like RLUSD, USDC, USDT, and so on to earn a yield on it, which they can't do in the banks. They can do, but the banks are too greedy to do that. So, there's still the anti-money laundering and know your customer provisions as they apply to decentralized finance. Whether essentially the regulators will be required to have a quorum of directors and commissioners, and whether there will be ethics provisions enforced on essentially the president and other lawmakers, the banking committee's members have not yet indicated if they are making any progress on some of the issues. A markup essentially hearing still seems likely to happen in the coming weeks. It's just unclear when. Another complicating essentially factor is the Federal Reserve. President Donald Trump obviously announced his intent to nominate former Fed board member Kevin Walsh as his new pick for the chair to succeed in the current chair essentially of Jerome Powell. The banking committee will run the essentially that confirmation process, which is likely to take essentially proceedings over crypto legislations when it ramps up. The Senate Agriculture Committee, which was working on its own version of the bill to address the commodities regulations aspects, did not go out of its way to make this essentially make its banking counterparts work on the capitalism essentially concerns easier. The committee held an hour-long hearing on Thursday to debate a handful of proposed amendments to its version of the crypto market structure bill, which ended essentially in the bill advancing on a party line vote. Democrats essentially out at the outset essentially of the hearing said they supported legislation broadly but wanted a baptism bill. The hearing brief, as it was still saw lawmakers vote down the proposed amendments. The committee chair, John Bozeman, saying that the banking committee had proper jurisdictions over several of the proposals. The SEC and CFTC, for their part, are not waiting for Congress to get moving. Paul Atkins and Mike, essentially, the respective agency chairs, held a joint conference on Thursday alongside a joint CNBC appearance and Fox News, essentially OP'd. Among their statements about harmonization in rulemaking, Mike announced essentially that he was directing the commodities regulator to engage in formal rulemaking on prediction markets and tokenized collateral. The backdrop to this year continues to be the upcoming elections. Fair Shake, one of essentially the crypto focused super political action committees, the Super PAC, boosted essentially by crypto companies, announced it has just under $200 million ready to deploy this year, a sum lawmakers will likely keep in mind as they continue to work on legislations. In other words, if you want to get regulations passed, you got to stop paying off politicians, which is exactly what that crypto super PAC is for. And who's that crypto super PAC funded by? Coinbase, Ripple, and so on. Kraken, and so on. It remains to be seen whether the money cannon will outweigh their concerns about the bill. In other words, will the politicians will accept the payments, not bribes, but will the politicians accept the payments of the super PAC, crypto super PAC, and essentially lean forward to a yes vote? Well, if they're true politicians, they will definitely lean towards the money. Now, what's happening this week inside the crypto space in terms of the regulations and the sit downs and the bankers and so on? So Monday, today in other words, we had the White House essentially convening a meeting between representatives of the crypto and banking industry to discuss stablecoin yields and reports on the crypto structure legislations, which went pretty well by essentially the announcements that were coming out of it. The meeting that happened today went well. Even according to Eleanor Terrett, they weren't at each other's throats like they were in the previous essentially sit down. Everybody was very calm and things moved forward smoothly in terms of discussions. So what's happening next? Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The Financial Stability Oversight Council, represented by Treasury Secretary Scott Benson, will make its annual report to the House Financial Services Committee. That's what's happening on Wednesday this week. What's happening on Thursday? At 10 a.m. again Eastern Time, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, represented by the Treasury Scott Benson, will make its annual report to the Senate in terms of the Banking Committee. So we're going to get a report on Wednesday from the House of Financial Services Committee and a report from the Senate Banking Committee so far, essentially what's been happening. So that's definitely something to look forward to on Wednesday and Thursday to see what's happening, how far we've come. Is everybody at each other's throats, or is something actually being done for the crypto space? Now, next on tonight's slide, moving away from essentially what's going to be happening this week to Ripple and the Epstein situation and Bitcoin and Stellar and so on. So if you haven't seen, or if you have seen essentially the Epstein files essentially being released, also just want to point out, ironically, every time we have an Epstein file release, somehow the crypto markets align together and dump, which everybody goes fear mode into crypto and the Epstein files are being released. And it's always deducted, but there's a bit of a corollary pattern that keeps on happening with Epstein files release and crypto dumping at the same time. It's almost like they want you to look the other way. Now, and a few other things obviously push the crypto space as we discussed in the beginning live show, but that one's a bit of a weird scenario that keeps on happening. Now, there was an email that was essentially with Epstein and so on that suggested that essentially, Bitcoin is the key player and they want essentially to keep it in the rails and they don't want essentially, XRP and so on, taking the ranks. They don't want XLM and XRP taking the ranks, and XRP and XLM is damaging Bitcoin's future in his point of view, in Epstein's point of view, and so on. So let's just go through it for a second. Was Ripple a threat to Epstein and essentially co? Why traders believe new files could serve bullish for XRP? Recent disclosures from the Epstein files have essentially reignited debate over early power struggles inside the crypto industry. After a 2014 email revealed that figures tied to Bitcoin's infrastructure viewed Ripple and similar projects as a threat to the Bitcoin vision. The correspondence has promoted essentially some XRP traders to argue that the documents validate a long held claims that Ripple posed a serious competitive challenge to Bitcoin's aligned interest. An interpretation essentially they claim is bullish for the token for XRP because XRP is not a PDF coin, while Bitcoin is, by the looks of it. At the center of the renowned discussions is July 31st, 2014 email sent by Austin Hill, a co-founder and then chief executive of Bitcoin infrastructure firm Blockstream, to a small group that included Jeffrey Epstein, MIT Media Lab director Joy, and LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. In the message, Hill warned that investors' exposures to both Bitcoin focused ventures and competing blockchain projects, especially Ripple and Stellar, created what he described as a streak and reputational conflict. Ripple, already operating as a cross border payments network at the time, and Stellar, a newly launched project founded by former Ripple co founder Jed McCallum, were portrayed as misaligned with the Hill referred to as the ecosystem we are building. When Bitcoin was first designed, the ecosystem Bitcoin was being mostly used on was the black market, the other market, in other words. You see, I mean, an average person gets to see 5 to 10% of the internet. An average Joe, or the 99.9% of the population gets to see 5 to 10% of the internet. The other 90% of the internet you don't get to see needs some sort of a currency to survive on. And Bitcoin was that currency that the other 90% were using on the internet. And the internet that you don't get to see because you need to access it through certain essentially browsers, and you need the VPN. And there's a few things you need to connect, which I'm not going to be giving you a drop down menu of how to enter the other side of the internet. The other 95% of the internet you don't get to see because, and trust me, you don't want to see the other side of the internet because it's horrifying, the simplest way to put it. So you don't want to see that side of the internet. But Bitcoin's ecosystem, back then was being a currency for the 95% of the internet you don't get to see. So you can see where this is going. And regarding essentially Epstein being involved in this and Blockstream's foundation, LinkedIn's co-founder and so on, all of them conspiring together essentially to stop the Ripple and XLM scenario and help Bitcoin's vision, which back then, as I said, was operating on the other 95% of the internet. Hill argued that investors effectively backing two horses in the same race risked undermining confidence among Bitcoin centric developers and stakeholders. Back then, the majority of Bitcoin centric developers and stakeholders were mostly criminals and hedge fund founders. A lot of people assumed that Bitcoin came out the womb randomly. We had a massive crash, 2008 crash. Nobody saw, minority saw coming, majority didn't see coming in 2008. Massive crash, crashed the entire world markets, mostly due to the real estate sector in the US, because bankers were giving out properties like they were giving out free samples. But that happened in 2009. Bitcoin comes out of nowhere, and we were all supposed to presume that it just came out randomly. As I said back then, nothing in this world happens. 3-4 years ago, I said to everybody, essentially on TikTok lives that I only used to do and don't do anymore, I do X and YouTube now, that I said nothing in this world happens randomly. It's always coordinated on a large scale. If it's something major, especially involving money, it's always coordinated to happen. So 2008 crash happens, and 2009 Bitcoin comes out of nowhere isn't random in any sort of a way. It was designed to come out essentially at that particular time. because they needed something else, because they knew the future of cash was going to be coming to an end, so they needed something else. And then we had COVID, which before COVID we had the World Bank testing digital payments, which was successful. Then we had COVID. The idea of COVID, or essentially some sort of a disease taking over the world, was also mentioned in the Epstein files, ironically. So World Banking does testings, as I said previously, and it was successful on digital payments. Then COVID happens. What happens in COVID? It makes people move away from cash. Why? Because cash carries germs. That's when crypto started booming. That's when everybody started going towards the crypto sector. It's almost they wanted you to go towards the crypto sector. So, as I said in the past. So, um, by the looks of it, it shows who was against Ripple. It shows who was against XRP and who was against Stellar and XLM and so on, and why certain crypto projects were heavily targeted by the SEC because they were weaponized. The SEC was weaponized by the banking sector, it's very obvious on that matter. And also, by the looks of it, it was weaponized by Bitcoin maxis and Jeffrey Epstein, and the list goes on. Co founder of LinkedIn is involved in this scenario, and the list is just huge on the amount of people that are not just involved in this, but involved in everything else that if Jeffrey Epstein was involved in. So David Schwartz, even himself, essentially came out. Ripple's former, essentially chief technology officer, said that the 2014 emails could represent only a small portion of a broader opposition Ripple faced during the industry's early years. So, while Bitcoin was being used to purchase illegal things, I'm not going to be mentioning what things on the other 95% of the internet, Ripple was being developed to be used on the right side of the market space, while Bitcoin was being designed to use on the left side of the market space. So, even David Schwartz himself coming out and saying that, this was just a small glimpse of what we had to go through, suggesting that the documents could be the tip of a giant iceberg. David Schwartz said the message suggested that hostility towards Ripple and similar projects may have been more widespread than the correspondence alone indicates. Gary Gensler 100% should be essentially investigated now, especially now. Gary Gensler should be investigated due to the involvements of Jeffrey Epstein's emails. Even though Gary Gensler wasn't mentioned in any sort of a way, it's just the timelines of essentially Gary Gensler being at MIT, teaching about cryptocurrencies while having not much of an essentially introduction to cryptocurrencies, and then becoming the SEC chairman at the same time, and also saying, I don't know anything about crypto, while he previously taught crypto in MIT, which is quite ironic. Nothing essentially is lining up, but it's lining up in the way we want it to, because we all saw the manipulation happening over the years. So, this is an email from Austin Hill to Jeffrey Epstein, essentially explaining that Hill felt that the support for Ripple and Stellar made someone enemy/opponent, Schwartz wrote on X, David Schwartz. He added that the sad part was we really were all in this together, and this kind of attitude hurts everyone inside the space. In other words, those big, essentially Bitcoin maxis inside the crypto space, not all of them, but some of them had a hand to play the crypto space being targeted by the SEC. So there's very same people that want crypto to advance with the exact same people that were manipulating and weaponizing the SEC to go against the crypto space. How ironic is that? At the time, Bitcoin aligned essentially firms such as Blockstream were essentially focused on building infrastructure tightly coupled to Bitcoin's network, while Ripple and Stellar pursued alternative ledger designs aimed at payments and financial institutions. While Ripple and Stellar tried to keep things on the books, Bitcoin was trying to keep off the books. That's why Jeffrey Epstein and the Bitcoin maxis loved Bitcoin, because Bitcoin could be kept off the books. And why would you need a currency that could be kept off the books unless it was going to be used for illegal purposes, which is exactly what it was used for day one. 95% of the internet that you don't get to see, as I said, the currency that was used on that side of the internet was Bitcoin. The documents only show that he received copies of discussions essentially about perceived conflicts of interest among investors in rival crypto projects. On X, some XRP supporters that have seized on essentially the documents as proof that powerful early industry players viewed Ripple as a threat, and they still do. There are still essentially, families or banks or someone out there that is still being threatened by Ripple. How do we know this? Well, when Ripple applied for a banking charter license through the OCC, Every single banking association decided to essentially send a letter to the OCC to tell them to slow it down on giving out a bank charter license. So you could still tell they're being threatened by Ripple. And there's a major reason I could possibly see why Ripple doesn't want to go public, because it doesn't want to share a piece of the pie with these demons that are pretty much running the show. That's the simplest way to put it. They are genuine satanic demons that essentially did horrific things and want a piece of the pie, continuing forward. Which is why many reasons of, Ripple doesn't want to go public, because they don't want to share a piece of the pie. Ripple wants to be in charge. If they go public, they will be brought out and their future will be dictated by them. If they're not public, Ripple's future is dictated by Ripple itself. And Ripple doesn't need money, as they've said in the past, and hence why they're not going public yet. They don't need money at all. So, another user also framed the relations more starkly, suggesting that Epstein's exposure to the debate implied recognition of Ripple's significance. This is seriously bullish for XRP because it shows that XRP is a clean token, whereas Bitcoin is riddled with everything negative. Traders bullish on XRP argue that the documents reinforce a narrative in which Ripple was not a fringe project, but a serious competitor to Bitcoin. And it does. It shows that. That essentially Ripple was not a project that essentially randomly came out of nowhere. Ripple was not a project that essentially was money grabbing people. Ripple is not a project where these influencers are coming out for the longest time saying Ripple's stealing from you, Ripple has no purpose, Ripple has no future, Ripple is stealing from you, is dumping on you, they're taking away your money. Those idiots are all morons. Every single one of those influencers for the longest time have been coming out are complete morons, because these smartest individuals in this world who lead behemoth operations, who essentially lead behemoth corporations, billion-dollar corporations, were threatened by Ripple and what it brings towards the table. While you have influencers who are coming out for the longest time saying Ripple has no future, it has no utility, it has no competition, Bitcoin is better, while the actual individuals that have billions to their names were shivering by the sight of Ripple, and the influencers were coming out like idiots and saying Ripple has no utility. But the billion-dollar organizations saw the utility, but the influencers that are against Ripple didn't. How ironic is that? I mean, the amount of morons inside the crypto space is quite ridiculous. Now, the ones that hate XRP. This is seriously bullish for XRP. They knew all along that they were going to essentially the top and wanted to stop Ripple. Again, billion-dollar CEOs saw the potential of Ripple back then until now, while crypto influencers who hate XRP say XRP has no utility. But a billion-dollar CEO sees the utility from 10 years ago. Traders bullish on XRP argue that documents reinforce a narrative in which Ripple was essentially not a French project, but a serious competitor to Bitcoin-centric infrastructure and efforts. Even in the industry's earliest stages, for those traders, the emails show proof of early resistance to non-Bitcoin blockchain models, a resistance they say will likely be bullish for XRP's future in price. Also, on that topic of Ripple and XRP, on the topic of XRP and Ripple advancing even further inside the essentially financial sector, inside the world market space, Ripple secures a full EU e-money license in Luxembourg. The payments firm said Luxembourg's CSSF has granted final electronic money institution approval, moving it from in-principle status to a license it can use to expand Ripple's payments across the bloc in the EU. Ripple said today it had received a full approval from the Electronic Money Institution (EMA) license from Luxembourg's financial regulator and the Commission, a step that would essentially let the company scale regulated payment services across the European Union. Ripple announced primary approval last month and has essentially since met all conditions required by the CSSF, which has now granted it a final authorization. Europe has always been a strict priority for us, and this authorization allows us to scale our mission of providing robust, compliant blockchain infrastructure to clients across the EU. Case, essentially Craddock, managing director of the UK and essentially Europe at Ripple, said, "We are now better positioned than ever to help European businesses transition into a more efficient digital-first financial era," he added from Ripple. The move builds on Ripple's recent regulatory push in Europe. The company said it received an EMA license and a crypto asset registration from the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, last month as well, adding to a growing set of permissions for operating payments and crypto related services in key jurisdictions. Ripple framed the Luxembourg license as a lever to accelerate Ripple payments across the EU. Its cross border payments product aimed at banks, fintechs, and enterprise clients. Luxembourg is commonly used as a base for regulated financial services across the EU, though Ripple did not detail how quickly it expects it to roll out services or whether essentially which member states are in first line. Ripple also said its global license counts as essentially grown to more than 75, positioning it essentially as one of the more heavily licensed companies in crypto as the industry shifts towards regulated institution facing use cases. Ripple holds more licensing than any other crypto project out there to be able to push itself and advance itself. When people weren't giving essentially Ripple a position, when Ripple was being threatened, when Ripple was being scrutinized, when Ripple was being sued, they didn't sit there and take it. They stood up and advanced. They acquired $1 billion license. They acquired essentially $1 billion businesses around the world. They acquired essentially licenses around the world. They have more licenses than ever. When they saw the banking essentially sector still going against them in 2025, they applied for a banking charter license. Ripple is a company that no matter how much you try to push it away, it will come back fighting for its position. And it's exactly what it's doing. With all the downs and ups that we've seen inside the market space and the downs that we've recently essentially experienced inside the market space, with the manipulation we've experienced inside the market space, don't ever forget about the bigger picture. Because they are trying very hard to make you forget about the bigger picture. On that note, we have reached the endings of tonight's live. This was the CMF live show. It stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles. You can tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards for the most recent news about cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. It's so great to be back. So great to see all of you. And the essentially disclaimer of this live show, as always, is no financial advice, no political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. And don't worry anytime when the market goes down. Keep your vision on the bigger picture. If Ripple can go through the ups and downs it's been going through, if Ripple can be sued and stand back up, if Ripple essentially can be scrutinized and stand back up, if Ripple can be debanked and stand back up, if Ripple can essentially lose its licenses, pay billions of dollars in fines and still stand back up, you could also stand back up if the market hits you down. Because Ripple's been doing it back to back. They keep on getting pushed down and standing back up and taking another step forward. You could also do the exact same thing every time the market pushes you back down. Stand up and hold your position or take another step further. In other words, buy or hold. Not financial advice whatsoever, but if Ripple can do it, so can we. Honestly, on that note, we have come to the endings of tonight's live show. Before we do end this live show, let's go start the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we will call it a night. So let's see where we're at. And honestly, it's so good to be back. Great job, Miles. New return, Miles. I've enjoyed tonight's program. Let's go, Scott. Let's see where we're at. Actually, we were here, I think. Yep, share the live. Let's go, Scott. Share that. Let's go, Scott. Where do you see XRP and XL actually going next 6-12 months? A lot of places. And thanks so Scott for the kind words. I keep researching XDC. Where does it come into play, or does it? It comes into play a little bit later on. Miles, I think that BTC is still operating at times. Previously, I agree. Soon, all 100% of ACH will be circulating supply. Your opinion on its future? When that happens, 100% of supply comes to the markets, it will shove the market down a little bit of ACH, and in the long term, it could pick up, is what I would say. XRP has been fighting and seen and unseen and still survived. Tell me the resilience doesn't equate to legitimacy. Facts. XRP XM, let's go. If everyone is always coordinated and crypto will take over the financial rails and is seemingly being tested for years, what is the delay now? That is all now is happening. It's coming just with the banks as they would be prepared to use it, especially XRP. Facts. Miles, are there any other projects you are considering that you have researched that are worth looking into besides the obvious ones? Yes, CC, the other token, Cat on Network, seems interesting to look into. Hi, Miles. I'm sorry I'm later. I had a long phone call. No problem, Peg. Good to see how you're doing. Thanks so much, Miles. Good night, everyone. Let's see Stormy. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual as well. Good night, Miles and CMF. Great live show, and we'll see you tomorrow. Let's go for it. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual as well. Thank you, Miles. Great to have you back. See you tomorrow. Let's go, Mike. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual. By the way, thank you so much to everybody who has liked and retweeted this live show. Thank you so much to every single one of you. If you haven't liked or retweeted this live show, CMF members, take 1 second to like and retweet this live show. If you watch us on X, if you watch us on YouTube, just drop a like as well. Drop a comment outside the live too. If you follow and subscribe to me during this live show, thank you so much and welcome to the CMF family. Fantastic live, Miles. Thank you. So good to have you back. Good night, Miles and CMF. See you all tomorrow night. Jason, let's go. See you tomorrow. Mike, see you tomorrow. Free Forever, see you tomorrow. Stormy, see you tomorrow. Thanks, Miles. It's really great to have you back, mate. Thanks for another wonderful evening. See you tomorrow. Let's go, Addy. See you tomorrow, sometimes you as well. Dang, my comments aren't being read. All good. Take care, Miles and CMF. Ray, good to see you, brother. How you doing? I didn't see any of your comments. Not that they haven't been read. None of them came up. That's a bit weird. I'm going up. Your last comment that I saw was Dan Pina. And then after that, what up, Miles? Hope all is well, is what I saw. Beyond that, there were no other comments from you, I'll be honest. They just didn't come up. But you know me, I read everyone's comments. Sorry about that. It's not on my side. I would have to restream or YouTube or something happened there. We appreciate you, Miles, and great see you tomorrow, but at the same time as usual. We appreciate you, Miles. Good to see you back. You must be still jet lagged. Enjoy your night all. I am definitely jet lagged, Lena. Good to see you as well. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. I barely had any sleep. My sleep's been all over the place. And thanks, Miles, for your remarkable analysis of the crypto markets. I'm thinking of buying XLM and XLP in 2026. I'll need your advice on where to buy and hold them. Thanks, Miles, and see you on at the next. Let's go. Carl, you can message me anytime you want on X or on Telegram. And or let me know if you want to call as well, no problem. As I said to everybody in the past as well, you call me and message me anytime you want. Just let me know if you want to call me 5 minutes, 10 minutes beforehand. Thanks. And I don't charge a single penny either. I'm completely free, as I've said in the past. I believe in helping people more. Thanks, Miles. Did you say CC? Yes, essentially the ticker for the project is CC. The name of the project is Caton Network. It's an interesting project to look into, I would have to say. Thank you, Miles, and CMF family. Great live. Have a good night. Let's go, Carol. Carlos, see you tomorrow sometime as usual. Thanks, Miles. I'll check out CC. Let's go, Shelly. The project you thought was good was CC. Yes, it's an interesting project to look into, is what I would say. CC. Love and respect you, brother. Leave a comment, guys, after the live. Miles is back. Thank you. Let's go. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. This was the CMF live show. Stands for Crypto Miles family. My name is Miles. Disclaimer of the live show is Monday. The disclaimer of this live show is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual, 10 p.m. London time onwards. Like, retweet, follow, subscribe if you already haven't. If you have, thank you so much. Miles, always free. He has never charged anything. Facts. Let's go, Scott. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. So good to be back. Love you all. See you tomorrow, same time as usual.